So when I was in college, two of my closest friends and we had this great idea of hiking in Shenandoah and to see the sunrise at the top of the mountain. Now, if you want to see the sunrise, obviously that means you have to go up to the top of the mountain before the sun comes up. And so we got to the park at 12 a.m. And looking back, I don't even know how that was allowed. I'm pretty sure nowadays they close after dark. So I think it might have been illegal. But we went to Shenandoah at 12, and we started the hike. And we definitely overestimated how long the hike was because we got there to the top of the mountain at 2 a.m. So we got there, in 2 hours. And that was I think 3 or 4 hours before the sunrise. So, it was a long hike up. It was at Old Rag for those of you who might know. But, it was in the summer too, so it was really hot on the way up. But if you guys know about mountains, when you get to the top, it's very windy, and also no matter how warm it might be during the day, at nighttime it gets really cold. So we're at the top of the mountain. We have to wait for 4 hours. We're sleep deprived and we're tired. We're trying to get some sleep, but it's so windy and so cold that we can't even sleep. So we're just waiting there for 4 hours, just talking, trying to get some sleep, and then we finally see the sunrise. It's beautiful, but it only lasts for 10 minutes, right? The wonder and the amazement and the awe, right? And after that, it's another 3 or 4 hour hike back down. So we basically spent a 6-hour trip for 10 minutes of enjoyment. But anyway, after the hike, right? After we see the sunrise, we're hiking downwards, and it's morning again. Sun's up, so it gets hot again. So we're sweating and we're exhausted. We finally get to our cars, and at this point, we're thirsty, we're tired, sleep deprived, we're hungry, we're just exhausted, emotionally, mentally, physically. And, so at this point, we're getting ready to leave the park. And, again, we're just dying. And we say to ourselves, okay, the first restaurant that we see, we're going to go and eat at, right? No matter what it is, I don't care what it is, we're going to go and eat. And this is Shenandoah, so it's literally the middle of nowhere, right? And so we're driving for 10, 15, 20 minutes before we actually see a shopping center where they have actual people, civilization. So we go in, and it's some dingy old restaurant, right? But they have a breakfast buffet, all you can eat breakfast. And at this point, we're so tired, we're so hungry, we're so thirsty, we'll just take anything, And I think looking back, when I think about that restaurant, I don't even remember how the food tastes like because I think it was so bad, But, in that moment, we're so tired, so hungry, we'll take anything. And I think even despite the fact that, the quality of the food wasn't that great, I think just the fact that we had somewhere to just sit down and to finally relax after just walking nonstop, get a cold glass of water and to eat food, I think just being in that environment, in that place of, rest was such a huge relief to us, right? After just, hiking all night long, not knowing if we're going to come back down safely, right? Emotionally, mentally, we're exhausted. But now in this safe place, right? This place where we know that we don't have to suffer and, endure any longer. There was just this overwhelming sense of peace and relief. And just being able to rest in that place, I think, was such a comforting and great moment for us. And I think looking back, that's one of my fondest memories. Despite having all that struggles, right, being able to come to this restaurant that I'll never eat at ever again, but finding rest and relaxation there. The human body, we need rest. Physically, when we're exhausted and tired, right, our bodies release stress hormones to tell us that we need rest. And so rest in the lives of not, just everybody, right, but also in the Christian is crucial for our well-being. In today's passage, we see the Israelites being brought by the Lord to this well in the middle of the wilderness, right, where there's no shelter, no source of water, right? The Lord provides for the Israelites this place where they can come together as a community and to enjoy the Lord's rest. All right? And so today we're going to talk about how the Lord provides us with rest, right, in His goodness. Now, looking at how we got here, right, in recent events of the Israelites, right, they haven't had an easy journey so far, right? Recently, if you look back a few days on the passages that we read, right, they come across Edom, right, this nation that is supposed to be, right, like brothers to them, all right, and they go there thinking that obviously because they're our brothers, right, because they're people who are close to us, that they would give us shelter, give us safe passage, right? And yet what we see is that they deny Israel. And they say that if you come through our lands, we will threaten you, we will destroy you. And so having been rejected by these people who thought they could trust, they had to go around and they journey through, right, a far more difficult path, right? Not only that, during this journey, we see the loss of one of their beloved leaders, Aaron, right? Right, this man who was called by God to give the Israelites leadership, right? This sense of hope that they had someone that they could trust in, right? Now suddenly gone through his death, right? And as they mourn, right, the emotional toil that they must have felt during this time, right, must have been great, right? And continuing on, they also face battles, right? They come across enemies who oppress them, and through the Lord's help, right, they obviously win and succeed in their battles, but still, it must have been exhausting and draining on them nonetheless. Not only that, as they continued traveling, right, we see in yesterday's passage, right, the faithlessness of the Israelites as they complain about why it is that they have to go on this journey, right? Again and again, like this repeated pattern that the Israelites show of, wishing that they could go back to what was before, not seeing what is up ahead, the goodness that God promises them, right? And in that unfaithfulness, we see God's punishment delivered onto the Israelites, right? They've not had an easy journey recently, right? They're going through all these difficult situations, all these troubles and trials and struggles, right? And I can only imagine just how exhausted these Israelites were, right? Not only physically, but emotionally, mentally, and spiritually as well, right? They faced many, many battles, internally and externally, right? And in the midst of that, right, at the peak of their exhaustion, at the peak of their doubts and their worries and their anxieties, right, we see as they journey on, the Lord brings them to this well, right? Now, this well is, insignificant, right? It's just called beer, right, which is just the word well, right? There's no special indication of what this place really is, right? Unlike the other landmarks around the area, right, that have names, right? This place is just simply just a random spot in the wilderness that the Lord decided to bring them to. And yet, this well, this unnamed well, is a place of significance for the Israelites because in this place, right, in that moment, the Lord brought them there for rest. Now, when we look at how the Israelites got there, right, and I think their attitudes and their faithlessness, I think God had every right to let the Israelites continue on in their trials and suffering. Even in the midst of their exhaustion and their struggles and their anxieties and their doubts, to let them continue on, right, without providing anything for them. God would have been completely justified, I think, right, because of the attitude and the way that the Israelites, insulted God. I think God could have just easily let them go on their ways in the wilderness. And yet, despite all of that, despite the rebellion of Israelites, despite their attitudes and their hardened hearts toward God, we see God providing them with this place of rest, this well, right? And it's not even that God is, responding to the Israelites' complaints, right? No, it says the Lord took initiative and he said, bring them to this well that I may give them water, right? I think, from a human perspective, right, if I was to take, some kids on a road trip to like Disneyland or something, right? If I knew that I was taking them somewhere nice, somewhere that they would enjoy, right? But along the ride, right, these kids kept complaining and asking me, can we just go back, right? If they kept telling me like, oh, this is stupid, why are we doing this, right? If they cursed me out while I'm, trying to take them somewhere for them, right? I don't think I would, I don't think it'd be easy for me in that moment to be loving and think about how I can care for them, right? I think I would more have the attitude of, okay, then if you're going to complain, then just continue to just complain until we get there, right? But God is not like that. We see that in today's passage, despite everything that the Israelites had done to offend God, right? His heart is for the Israelites, that he goes out of his way knowing what they are in need of, and before they even ask, right, providing them with this much needed rest. I think in this passage, we see the love of God, the compassion of God that he has for all of us. That he sees us, right, in our wilderness, right, in our anxieties and our struggles, and he sees that we are in much need of rest, and he provides that rest for us. A lot of us, I think, young or old, no matter what, right, we'll always go through struggles, we'll always go through trials. There's always ups and downs in our lives. Right? We might be, facing battles and oppression, against the world and the situations that we're placed in, right? However big or small, right? We might be fighting, for whatever it is. And, these fights and battles take a toll on us for sure. Right? Maybe like the Edomites, right? We have, someone that we thought we could trust, right? Only to feel betrayed and hurt by these people. To feel like, that we're abandoned by the people that we love. Right? Again, this would take such an emotional toll, right? This hurt that we felt through this kind of situation, for sure, would take, much needed care, right? Or maybe we're struggling, right, in our faith. When we face these challenges, when we see these trials come up in our lives, we might question God and say, God, why are you putting me through this? Lord, if you're truly for me, why am I going through this? And you might, be struggling and continue to doubt and struggle with unfaithfulness to God, as the Israelites did, right? And yet, in spite of all of that, right, in spite of all of our struggles, all of our pains and our doubts, I think the Lord, in his heart, has a desire to see us come to him and find rest, right? That in our moments where we need comfort and peace, the Lord offers it to us, not only willingly, but lovingly. Right? That he desires for us to find his peace, that he desires for us for our well-being. And so today, as we reflect on today's passage, on what the Lord is offering us today, I want to encourage all of you guys and invite you all to find rest in the Lord. All of you who are going through your own battles, going through your own struggles and doubts and wandering, come find rest in the Lord. Right? For a long time, I think, when I was, early 20s, I think, in my high school, college years, and then after graduating college, I always wonder, what did that mean, right? What does it mean to find rest in the Lord? Right? Because that's such a ambiguous, statement. I feel like that Christians just throw around. But as I, continue to think about, my adolescence and into my adulthood, right? What does it mean to rest in the Lord? I think today's passage kind of gives us a really good example, right? When we think about what the Israelites must have been feeling at this time, right? After going through all these things, after experiencing probably some of the worst moments in their lives, right? The most difficult times, we see just miraculously God leading them to this place, this well, where their needs are met. Now, I imagine in that moment, more so than their physical needs being met, I bet they're thinking back on their experiences, their past selves, recognizing their wrongs, right? Knowing that they had sinned against God. And yet, in spite of all of that, the Lord graciously and lovingly providing for them, right? I imagine that the comfort that they felt was beyond that comfort I felt at that restaurant, right? Of relief and satisfaction. The comfort and the rest that I experienced in the Lord in that day, I think, must have been security and peace, knowing that the God of the universe not only provides for them and has their back, but He also does so lovingly and willingly. I don't think there's any greater rest, no greater peace and comfort than the fact that the God of the universe cares for and loves us and will be there for us and wants the best for us. And so with that, right, with this rest in the Lord, I want to encourage all of you all, invite all of us today to find rest in the Lord. Right? All who are lost in their lives right now, who feel like they don't know where they're going, I invite you to come be found by our shepherd. All of you who are thirsty, looking for satisfaction in the world, come find drink from the Lord who offers us the living water. All who are weary from the world, right, from their lives, from trying to make sense of the world, come find rest in the one who offers it to you. And so, as we pray today, as we close, I just want to pray for all of us. I just want to invite all of you. Come find peace in God. As we reflect on today's passage, think about just your struggles and your battles, your wandering. God knows just how difficult and hard it is, how emotionally tolling, how mentally exhausted you might be. God knows all of that, and He invites you here today to find your rest in Him. Right, that you can lay down all of your burdens onto Him, knowing full well that He has you in His hands. Right, so I just want to invite all of us to pray at this time.